Hello everyone, I am Shrutirupa. I work as a web application security analyst at Qualys. I am also InfoSec Girls Pune chapter lead and also one of the lead for women who code in Pune. So in this video, I'll be talking about the blockchain technology. I have been given with some questions which I'm supposed to answer. And so let's get started. So blockchain is just a chain of blocks where each and every block is connected to its previous block through hashes. So it is a kind of decentralized and distributed ledger technology. It's a way of keeping the records, and the records can be of anything, like any kind of transactions that you are doing or anything. Like for Bitcoin, we have information related to the transactions that you are performing. And since it is distributed amongst all the nodes within the network, hence the term distributed ledger, it is again decentralized as it has no central authority in it. So there are a number of nodes within the network where it is equally distributed. By equally distribution, I mean to say is each and every transaction which is getting updated in the blockchain is equally visible to each and every node within the network. So it is completely transparent. The thing that I said about what blockchain is, like each and every block is connected through hashes. Now hashes are used to maintain the integrity of any kind of data. So in blockchain, it is maintaining the integrity of the entire records which is getting updated in the blockchain. So it is not possible to perform any kind of man in the middle attack, as each and every block is linked to its previous block, going back to the very first block ever created. The very first block ever created is known as the Genesis block. Hence, it improves the security of the records stored in the blockchain, as you cannot do any kind of modification to the data. You cannot tamper it. You can be assured that the data stored is secure and not modified. Hence, once in a blockchain, always in the blockchain. Also, every transaction happening within the network is very well validated and verified. So each and every node within the network is aware of it. So there are a group of miners who are actually validating and verifying the transactions going on, and then updating it in the blockchain. I can give you one example, like it is actually avoiding double spending attack. Like, since it is mostly used for virtual currencies, I'll give you an example with respect to virtual currencies. Like if you have one Bitcoin in your wallet, and if you make a transaction of sending one Bitcoin to another address, and again before the time it is validated, you try to make another transaction using that one Bitcoin which you just did with, you'll see that any one of the transaction is getting verified. You cannot do double spending. This is one of the example how it is actually validating and verifying the transaction. So only when a transaction gets confirmed, it is updated in the blockchain, and every node within the network gets to know about it. Hence, it is transparent. As I said, that you cannot tamper the data is one of the main and incredible advantage of blockchain. Along with it, there is transparency. Like whatever transaction is happening, you are well aware of it. You know that there is some transaction that is happening. You within the network, you can see. It's like it is anonymous. It is not like you can see who the person is, but you can see the address which is provided over there. Another advantage is that, as I said, once the transaction is done, it cannot be reversed. So it is very helpful in industries such as in financial industries. So if you are doing any kind of transaction, you cannot reverse it. So every transaction is properly maintained, every record is properly maintained. So you do not lose any kind of data. So it will be very difficult for a suspicious or a malicious user to do any kind of such transaction. Again, as I said, once it is in a blockchain, always in the blockchain. Hence, that is the main thing. Another example that I would like to give is you can take example of a hospital where it is very important to keep records of each and every patient, and the record should never be deleted or should never be, lost. So it is very useful for the doctors and also for the patients to have the records. For doctors especially, because they need to have the records of each and every patient, their history, it is very important. And depending on that, like since it is updated in the blockchain, it is very useful in such kind of scenarios. Apart from advantages, there are some drawbacks to blockchain as well, such as the storage issue. Since each of the block is linked to the previous one, going back to the very first block ever created, it requires a large amount of storage to keep this amount of data. And it keeps on growing. It is currently growing, and it may result into the outstripping the growth of the storage devices used. Although blockchain is decentralized, but if we take an example of suppose Bitcoin, which uses proof of work to mine a block, and this is again another drawback where you have to use a large amount of processing power which it requires. So a group of miners, if they are having that much amount of processing power, and if the miners are malicious, they can actually manipulate an entire transaction, and it may not remain decentralized as it sounds to be. And this type of attack can be called as 51% attacks, where more than 50% of the miners, malicious miners, are manipulating the entire transaction. Although it requires a large amount of processing power, which is practically impossible currently, but theoretically it is. Again, one of the drawback, as I would say, is an advantage also, like you cannot modify the data. So taking example of another blockchain platform, say Ethereum. Ethereum introduced, with Ethereum we got introduction to smart contracts. So the concept of smart contracts, where you write some pieces of code where you are trying to fulfill some kind of conditions, and based on that the further work happens. So those code also get updated in the blockchain, and if those smart contracts are vulnerable, you cannot do anything, you cannot modify it. There's one example, like with Ethereum, there was an attack called re-entrancy attack, which is a very critical attack, critical vulnerability, which resulted into loss of large amount of ethers. But since it has already been updated in the blockchain, you cannot modify it. So the thing that you can do with it is you can hard fork it, but still, since it is updated in the blockchain, you have to take care of that because you cannot do anything about it. So depending on the requirements, you can decide if you need a blockchain or not. Like I gave you an example of the scenarios such as in hospital industry or in financial industry, you can actually use blockchain where you want to have record of each and every transaction or record of each and every patient within the hospital, so that you do not lose any kind of data. So there you can use blockchain. But there are other scenarios too where you do not require the use of blockchain because it requires large amount of storage and processing power. Now for students, there can be a number of opportunities in blockchain. You can be a blockchain developer. Now depends what kind of language you're familiar with. You can use Java, Python, it depends completely. You can be a consultant. You can help with blockchain security. Since with blockchain there are some evolutions like Bitcoin, which was blockchain 1.0. There is Ethereum, which introduced us to the concept of smart contracts, which is blockchain 2.0, where you can actually write code for smart contracts. You can use Solidity or Viper as the language for writing smart contracts, and you can provide security to them. You can create decentralized applications, which is blockchain 3.0, and with decentralized applications, you're actually building an entire application with where you're having a blockchain at the back end, and can be used for various purposes. Now the thing is, for being a developer or a consultant, the basic thing that you need to start with is understanding what blockchain is, the basic concept. You need to understand how blockchain works, how blockchain functions, how is verification and validation happening over there, how secure it is. You need to understand the cryptography. You need to understand what hashes is, how hashing is helping, how is it taking some time to validate, what kind of mechanisms. There are different algorithms which are being used for different platforms of blockchain. Within single platform of blockchain, there are different algorithms, there are different mechanisms, there are consensus mechanisms that are being used. You need to understand that thoroughly so that you can start your career with blockchain. Because suppose you're giving an interview for blockchain developers, say, you will be asked these kinds of questions where you should be well versed with what blockchain is, how is it functioning, how it is working, what is the current status, can you see the the current transaction, how you are seeing. You need to understand the test networks where you will be creating. You need to understand the wallets, everything that you need to know. These are certain requirements where you can obviously start your career with blockchain technology, but these are the basic things that you need to start with. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Atul, and let me know if you have any doubt. I'll share my Twitter handle and my LinkedIn profile over here, so that you can contact me directly for any kind of doubt, any problem. You can directly ask me. And thank you so much.